I'm Luke. Today on Out of Darts, we are launching a brand new blaster. This is the ultimate side-along blaster, Herja. Tarik and I are so excited to get this new product out. A disclaimer about this video, this is obviously a promotion for a product that we sell on our website. That should be very obvious at this point. This is a brand channel at the end of the day, but we are really excited to finally get this out. This project has been over 3 years in the making, starting basically before the start of the pandemic. It's gone through a lot of different iterations, which I'm going to share with you today, and Tarik's going to talk remotely on some of those points as well. And we think you're really going to like this new little blaster. It should be no surprise that Tarik and I really like unique, novelty, and mountable blasters. Anything that's modular and mountable, we think is a really, really fun avenue to pursue. So Herja is really about this compatibility where you can mount this to anything you want. Herja is intended to be a side-along blaster, meaning it's a blaster that you can add on to your existing blaster, whether that's as a sort of last stand, last ditch effort, or to simply complement your primary with a secondary. And I can see a lot of times when that would be extremely useful, especially in HVZ or any game where you've got a lot of close quarters things happening, where someone might catch you reloading mags around a corner, and that's where Herja really shines. Now, some of you might be wondering about the name Herja. Herja is a Valkyrie, which we thought was appropriate, and the definition is to devastate, also goddess of war, depending on where you're looking at for your source. With this blaster, we had a huge focus on keeping it as small as possible, and you'll notice, compared to the size of my hand, I can virtually hide the blaster behind my hand. But I know when you're seeing this, it's kind of hard to compare to other blasters, so I'll pull out a few that people do know. Here we've got the Gecko, just for a approximate size comparison. Here's a Nightingale. You can kind of see size-wise compared to that. Fairly comparable, given that they do share the same flywheel size internally. Here's one next to a Hammershot. Also of note would be putting it next to sort of the Motoblitz front blaster. And, you know, of course, it could actually be attached right here. The mounting options are equally as versatile. We offer Picatinny, end strike rail, and rival rail, all three of which can be mounted to any of the three surfaces. And again, you can also mount a standard Picatinny rail, either for visual or for connection purposes. And all of these are done with brass inserts. We launched Jupiter about 4 years ago, and one of the biggest things we've learned is that we wanted to avoid toy screws at all costs going forward. So you won't see another design of ours on the shop that has screws threading directly into plastic unless it's absolutely unavoidable. Herja uses a standard Talon magwell, meaning the 6s, the 10s, the 15s, the 18s, and of course even a Tachi will fit in here. And then you have a Tomahawk. Maybe not. The blaster has a really unique switching system in that it can be fired essentially in 3 different ways. The first is there's a trigger on the right side. The next, there's a trigger on the left side. And the last included with the blaster is the materials to build a remote switch. So you can simply plug this in and you can mount this switch wherever you like it. This allows for a huge range of options as far as how you place this, how you activate it, how you fire it. I think people are going to have some real fun. I mean, I for one would love to see a couple of these mounted as like shoulder cannons as a follow-up to our Jimmy Kimmel build. So let me know down in the comments if that's something you'd like to see, because I'm thinking I bet we could get 3 of these per shoulder pretty easily with the magazines going straight up in the air. That sounds like a blast. Next, I wanted to dive a little bit into the history. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this project has been at least 3 years in the making.
It was after Mount Olympus. We were still waiting on the boards, and that hasn't changed up to this day. And everybody kept asking us, why don't we do a short dart blaster? Why don't we do a short dart blaster? There's still so many out there, short dart blasters. So we wanted to do something different. And this is where this idea of, okay, why don't we make a mounted version of Olympus that shoots short darts? And originally, I was going to make it out of the Hurricane because that's the only wheel set that you could get access to. FTW was just gaining popularity at that point, but we were looking at for it. And so the trick was, okay, could we use their mags and go from there? And I originally designed it for the 6 long darts. I tried making it work for short darts and ended up making my own mag to make it work. And for short darts to work as a double stack, which is the same size as a Hurricane mag, this required a different system. So originally we actually had a belt system, which is an interesting concept that doesn't always work out. We could get it to consistently fire. That's not the problem, but you were firing 2 shots burst. This all sounded great on paper, and using a different NG20 motor, a 90-degree one, we could actually shrink the size quite a bit. But as Luke and I kept talking about it, it was really hard to find that spring. We would have to source ourselves for the mag. And the other thing is it just wasn't practical.
And to us, it just really made sense to make something that could take a full-size Talon. Because if you're going to mount this on the side of your blaster, you really have a lot of options to let this extra length stick out the bottom. And if you don't want as much length, you can always pick up a 7-round mag or a 10-round mag, something shorter. So then we kind of moved on to figuring out the mag well. So this is a very boxy version of that prototype.
And this is where you can see I already started developing the button system. And this, again, as you probably guys know from Little Rocket, came from my puzzler background. There's a lot of lock systems that work by you have to hit 2 buttons at the same time. So I was like, could I use that to reduce the complexity? Yes, it's a little bit more printing, but in turn helps really make it feel nice.
Then we went a step further. We started curling it over to feel what it would feel like in the hand, kind of playing with where the lines were. Then Tarik took the time to actually make it as small as possible, but you can see here we're still pretty chunky, pretty blocky overall. And then we end up with our final here. This blaster was designed and engineered by Tarik with feedback from myself, but we also had some help this time around with a visual artist. My buddy Mo is a VFX artist. He's an animator in the film industry. He's worked on video games and a variety of other big name projects. If he gives us permission, I'm going to show some stuff from his Instagram up on the screen now. But he's a very talented artist. He was one of my college roommates, and it was a pleasure getting to work with him to come up with some of the visual aesthetic.
It's always an unusual process when you're trying to collaborate with somebody and have your ideas mesh. And this was quite of a different experience for me. I suck at styling. This is something I brought up every single time we worked on any blaster, and this is no different. With help of Morgoth, we managed to get something quite different. So we went through a couple of iterations. I sent him what the general shape of the blaster is based on the restrictions we had to deal with the size of the blaster. And he took that idea and just ran off with it, sent me multiple copies, and then I highlighted what parts were feasible, what wasn't, what I liked about it. And then he combined them into a single image. And I used that as a template to build it. That's why this one has such a unique shape. And I think it came out really well. Herja had quite a bit of design challenges. One is the size. For me, the Herja can be completely hidden behind my hand. So that's how small it is. So trying to fit everything in a small package, this is even smaller than the Jupiter. So you're working with a lot of very little space. And the second problem that stems from this small space is how do you make it comfortable to use and fire? So that's one thing is to have an external switch, but we also wanted to have a button on the blaster. And so the question became, where do you place it? And how does that affect the mag? So as the mag comes right from the center, as you can see, the buttons were in the back. That's why we were testing 2 different versions where the buttons were in the front and the buttons back. But we found out from testing that with the palm, you can hit these buttons if we made them big enough. And then lastly is where do you fit all the hardware? You have your motors in the front, and then you still have your switch, but then you have to add the battery as well. So this was truly pushing the limits of what is possible. Another one of the biggest things we had to deal with is, again, with the chip shortage. This is the thing that's been killing Mount Olympus, is that we cannot make a board. We don't have a board for Proton Pack. We don't have a board for anything. So we had to make a blaster that could work without a board in most instances. It's not a perfect solution because there's only a single switch when there's normally 2 switches. So we had to go through a lot of work. Luke helped me with this, with the wiring, trying to get this to be optimal as possible. And lastly, one of the most interesting design things is try to design a blaster that does all the parts don't exist yet. So when this started, we've changed through 3 different flywheels. We started with the Hurricane flywheels originally. We were going with that, and that added a lot of width to the blaster, and you can see in some of the versions. Eventually, we went with FTW while we were waiting for the Nightingale wheels to come in. So I was designing for a blaster that I did not have the wheels yet, and the Loki motors have not come out at that point yet. We still haven't received them. So it was an interesting issue of how do you future-proof this? How do you make it as easy? So it isn't just about designing a blaster that could work for both, but making it very compatible so that I can just change a couple numbers and it would work with these new parameters and new settings. As always, we follow our process of designing and then sending it out to beta testers to see what they thought. And one of the most interesting things is people always push blasters to the limit way beyond what we expected. So originally, when I designed this very thin, small profile rail system, I thought this would be perfect for most use cases, but people started putting in it on their links, on their Talon column, all these blasters, which is fine. But then what I didn't take into account is people putting ridiculously powerful springs on it. And it took no time at all, I think within a day, for somebody to break the rail system. And so I had to go back to the drawing board and design one that would still be sleek, yet fit the needs.
We see really 3 common uses for this blaster. The first is backing up your primary single shot blaster. So maybe you've got a single shot blaster like the Skewer, the Fate, or the Knockout, and you just want to have that firepower so when someone surprises you around a corner and you've only got that single shot, you can dump half a mag on them pretty quickly and easily. The next is mounting it on an arm or on a shoulder or some other mechanics, whether that's mounting it onto an RC car or onto any other sort of configuration you can think of. That I think is a really fun use case as well. And the last is simply just increasing the number of darts you can fire. So you can slap this blaster on a Strife, you can slap it on a Rapid Strike, and you've effectively doubled your firing capacity without increasing the size overall.
I personally enjoy putting it on my links as the pump grip. And this is one of the reasons why we had redesigned it so we can get this to work. But that allows you to have long range with your links and then switch to short range bursts when somebody comes up and close to you. For our playstyle here, which is close quarter inside a airsoft field, one of the best combinations I found was using a Knockout with a triple dart from a Little Rocket system. It's very silent and you can pick people off as you take corners, but if you engage in more than one, you have the Herja to back you up. And that playstyle worked out phenomenally in the games I was running in.
Now, it's worth noting that this concept is not a completely original concept. It's loosely based on a number of mods that have been done for years and years. When I first joined the hobby, I know Coop772 had I believe it was a side-along Rapid Strikes, or he had swarm fires on the side of a Rapid Strike. I know at one HVZ, the very first End War I actually went to, someone there had a basically stripped down Rapid Strike with the handle cut off, and it was mounted just like this, but it was considerably larger and of course not 3D printed or readily available. It took a lot of development and time and effort to physically mod that yourself. So we feel like we've taken what others have done in the hobby and kind of elevated it to the next level. And I know that's going to bring up another question, so I did want to address that. Obviously, Flycore is now a huge thing, and call it simultaneous inspiration, but we had no news of Flycore, and we were already to this point before Flycore even came out. And we were obviously just simultaneously working on the similar concept, though this isn't necessarily meant to be, it's not an open source concept and it's not a modular concept in that we're not intending you to make this into a blaster. However, one certainly could figure out a way to do that. I really like Flycore. We do have Flycore kits on the website for those that want to build that blaster. I think it's a really, really cool system that Old Fusion Designs has put together. But I promise you, this has been in the works for 3 years. So in addition to the versatile mounting options on the 3 sides of the blaster is also available, like our other blasters, in multiple rates of fire. And now this really is just driven by the change of the actual N20 gear motor. And we're using an N20 style pusher, a little similar to the Luchadora and other blasters, not unlike a Rapid Strike at the end of the day. But it gives us a pretty good rate of fire and a pretty good range overall. Now the blaster itself is not wired up with motor braking, and you might ask why, but the most important reason was that we wanted an external trigger. In order to do motor braking, you need a 3-terminal switch, a single pole dual throw, and to do that externally, you could certainly wire 3 wires in the 3 switches, but the 2 switches short each other out unless they're both being activated at the same time. Ultimately, the solution to this in the future would be to do either a MOSFET board or a relay. However, with the supply and board shortages and issues in producing PCBs that we've had, we wanted to design a product specifically that did not require a board in order to get to the market. Technically, there are a few other great notes. The Loki motors that we had made were made specifically for this blaster. They were literally the reason we wanted them, was we needed high RPM motors that could go in a small flywheel powered blaster. The flywheels themselves are the Worker Nightingale flywheels, and I have to say, Worker has nailed it on the design of those flywheels. Not only are they high performers, but they're extremely reliable. The shaft fit is nice and tight, so it's been really good on durability and reliability. And envelopment of the dart means that it's really easy on the darts, and the consistency shot to shot and the accuracy is better than some of the other competing micro-flywheelers that are out there. Now, seeing that this is a side-along or kind of an add-on blaster, our highest priority was not the performance. That said, it does perform pretty well. We're going to put the 20-shot average up here on camera, but keep in mind this really is a add-on blaster or a side-along blaster. It's not supposed to hit 200 FPS or anything like that. It is a micro-flywheel blaster, so there are technical limitations there, and while you could drive the motors hotter, we want it to also be extremely reliable over time.
One thing with Herja that we're doing quite different than I'd say with our previous releases is we're releasing some of the files online. So all accessory files like the rails, Picatinny, button casing for the remote switch, even alternative versions that weren't as effective or might have a different use case are going to be available on Printables, and you can find a link below. Now, for people that do not have a printer or don't want to print these parts, we're obviously going to have it available on the website, but this allows people to have a lot more customizability. We want to provide the tool for people to make any kind of variations they want on the mounting system so that you can mount it onto your shoulder, maybe on a helmet, any of these kind of crazy ideas. And we didn't want people to be limited by waiting for us to create the files.
Depending on popularity, we might continue this file release system in the future. We're not saying we're committing to going to any sort of open source route. Right now, we just cannot handle the level of customer service and follow-up required to do so, but we are investigating various avenues going forward. I think a blaster like the Nexus is a pretty obvious way to do this. You could either locate a button back here so you've got it really accessible, or you could actually peek through with your thumb right here. I can actually hit that pretty reliably once you've trained yourself to do it. You can see my hand is completely clear for priming, so I can prime fire, and then still have that side-along blaster. Pretty cool. On the goofier note, we've been playing with the Thumper from Sillybutts, and we threw one on the side of a Thumper. So you could be playing with your normal Thumper here, firing that, and then over here on the side you've got a trigger to dump a whole mag on someone, which honestly seems kind of fun. In fact, it's kind of a good little foregrip while you're at it. Herja is available today both on the store. You can buy it as a kit that you build yourself, and we've got a full build guide coming this week. And you can also buy it as a completed, ready-to-fire blaster as you see it right here. The only thing not included in the listing is a battery, LiPo alarm, and a LiPo charger. Those will be available as add-ons, of course, as usual. Thank you so much for watching. It's always a big day when we get to release a new product, and this one has been a long time coming, so it's exciting to get it out there and see what people think of it. I'd love to hear from you. What blasters would you like to see it on, and what would you use it on? We'll take some of the best comments and we'll start posting to social those combos actually shown in real life on specific blasters. So stay tuned for a build guide and other product guides for this blaster, and you should see a lot more to come. We've got a lot coming on the shop pretty soon. Worker Harrier pre-orders are good to go and available. and we should see the game face try-on sometime in January. On that note, if you've made it this far, if you're not subscribed to our email list, you definitely should join it. We send out a single monthly newsletter. We won't send out any more than that, so we're not going to spam you, we promise. We're always going to add value. It's going to feature some news from both the shop, the hobby, new releases, pre-orders, and a recap of different various videos we've done, along with links to blog posts that might be interesting to you as well. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'm out of darts.
So based on my testing and seeing how other people play around, hold up, we have an intruder.